In the small village of Umuaka, nestled along the banks of the mighty river Niger, life flowed as steadily as the water itself. Fishermen cast their nets at dawn, market women haggled over prices, and children splashed in the shallows, their laughter carried on the warm breeze. But beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic community, dark currents stirred. Emeka, a young fisherman known for his skill and determination, stood out among his peers. His weathered hands and sun-darkened skin spoke of long hours on the water, and his eyes held a fierce ambition that set him apart from the other men in the village. While they were content with their daily catch, Emeka dreamed of more, of wealth, of respect, of a life beyond the confines of Umuaka. One sweltering afternoon, as Emeka paddled his canoe into a secluded inlet he'd never explored before, he heard a haunting melody drifting across the water. Curious, he steered towards the sound, pushing through thick reeds until he emerged into a hidden cove. There, perched on a partially submerged log, sat the most beautiful woman Emeka had ever seen. Her skin gleamed like polished ebony, and her hair fell in long, intricate braids adorned with shells and riverstones. But it was her eyes that captivated him, deep and mysterious as the river itself. "Who are you?" Emeka called out, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to sound confident. The woman smiled, revealing teeth as white as river foam. "I am Adana," she replied, her voice as melodious as her song. "And you, brave fisherman, have wandered into my domain." Emeka's heart raced. He'd heard tales of water spirits since childhood, but had always dismissed them as stories meant to frighten children away from dangerous waters. Yet here before him was a creature that could be nothing else. Are you a mamiwata?" he asked, using the local term for water spirits. Adana's laughter rang out across the cove. "I am many things, Emeka, but yes, that is one name my kind are known by." Emeka's eyes widened. "How do you know my name?" "The river knows all who depend on it," Adana replied cryptically. "And I know you, Emeka. I know your dreams, your ambitions, your dissatisfaction with the life you lead." Emeka felt a chill run down his spine despite the heat. "What do you want from me?" Adana's smile turned sly. "It's not about what I want, Emeka. It's about what you want. I can give you everything you've ever dreamed of. Wealth, power, respect. All you have to do is marry me." Emeka's mind reeled. Marry a water spirit. It was madness. And yet, the promise of all he'd ever wanted dangled before him like a shimmering lure. "What's the catch?" he asked, knowing there had to be one. Adana's eyes flashed. "Smart man. The catch is simple. You must never betray me. Never speak of our arrangement to anyone. And most importantly, never take another wife. Do you accept?" Emeka hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "I accept."
Horrified, Adaobi fled from the Babalawo's compound, but his words haunted her. When she became pregnant for the 6th time, she knew she had to make a choice. 9 months later, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She named her Kioma, Good God. As she held her daughter, Adaobi made a terrible decision. In the dead of night, she crept to the family mausoleum where her 5 children were buried. With shaking hands, she exhumed their tiny bodies. What happened next was too horrific for her mind to fully process. The shadowy figure appeared again, its red eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You have done well," it purred. "The curse is lifted. Your children will live long lives." True to its word, Kioma thrived. She was followed by 4 more healthy children over the years. Adaobi's restaurants became wildly successful, and she became known as a pillar of the community. But the guilt ate away at her. Every time she looked at her living children, she was reminded of what she had done to achieve this happiness. The weight of her secret threatened to crush her. Now, 25 years later, Adaobi felt her life force ebbing away. She knew her time was short. The need to confess overwhelmed her. "Blessing," she called out weakly. The maid rushed in. "Yes, Mama." Call my children and my husband. I need to tell them something." Blessing nodded and hurried to make the calls. Within an hour, Adaobi's family had gathered around her bed. Emeka, now gray-haired and portly, sat beside her, holding her hand. Chioma, now a doctor, checked her vital signs with a worried frown. The other children, Obina, Ngozi, Chidi, and Adana, clustered around, their faces etched with concern.
The words had barely left his lips when Adana dove into the water. For a heart-stopping moment, Emeka thought she had disappeared. Then, with a great splash, she resurfaced, but where her legs should have been, a powerful fishtail now gleamed in the sunlight. "Come," she said, extending her hand, "let us seal our bond." Emeka took her hand and felt himself pulled into the water. Instead of the panic he expected, a strange calm washed over him as Adana drew him deeper and deeper. Just as his lungs began to burn, she pressed her lips to his, breathing life back into him. When they resurfaced, Emeka felt changed, stronger, more alive than he'd ever been. Adana smiled at him, her tail now replaced by legs once more. "Go home, my husband," she said. "Your new life begins tomorrow." Emeka paddled back to the village in a daze, his mind whirling with the impossible events of the day. That night he tossed and turned, wondering if it had all been a dream. But the next morning, as he cast his nets into the river, he knew it had been real. Fish practically leapt into his boat, more than he'd ever caught in a single day. At the market, buyers fought over his catch, offering prices far above the norm. Days turned to weeks, and Emeka's fortune soared. His little hut was replaced by a grand house, the envy of the village. He bought more boats, hired other fishermen to work for him. People who had once looked down on him now sought his favor, calling him Chief Emeka and bowing as he passed. Through it all, Emeka kept his promise. Each night he would sneak away to the hidden cove where Adana waited. Sometimes they would swim together in the moonlight. Other times she would tell him stories of the river's secrets. And always, always she would remind him of his vow. "Remember, my love," she would say, her eyes glinting in the darkness. "I am yours and you are mine, forever." For a time, Emeka was content. He had everything he'd ever wanted: wealth, respect, and a beautiful, mysterious wife. But as the months passed, a gnawing emptiness began to grow within him. He watched as his friends married local girls, started families. Children played in the streets, calling out, "Papa," as their fathers returned from the river. And Emeka began to want what he could not have: a normal life, a human wife, children of his own. The final straw came when his mother, growing old and concerned for the family line, confronted him. "Emeka, my son," she said, her voice wavering with emotion. "You have brought our family great prosperity, and for that I am grateful. But it is time for you to marry, to give me grandchildren before I go to join our ancestors." Emeka's heart ached. "Mama, I cannot." His mother's eyes narrowed. "Cannot? Or will not? There are many beautiful girls in the village who would be honored to be your wife. Why do you resist?" Emeka wanted desperately to tell her the truth, to unburden himself of the secret he'd carried for so long. But Adana's warning echoed in his mind, and he held his tongue. "I am not ready, Mama," he said instead. "Please give me time." But his mother would not be deterred. She began inviting eligible young women to their home, arranging chance meetings between them and Emeka. And despite his best efforts, Emeka found himself drawn to one in particular, Olana, the daughter of the village chief. Olana was everything Adana was not: warm, open, human. Her laughter was like sunshine, her touch solid and real. When she smiled at Emeka, he felt a warmth he'd never experienced with his river bride. As the days passed, Emeka found himself spending more and more time with Olana and less at the hidden cove. He told himself he was just being friendly, that there was no harm in it. But deep down, he knew he was treading dangerous waters. One evening, as Emeka and Olana walked along the riverbank, their hands brushed against each other. Without thinking, Emeka took her hand in his. Olana looked up at him, her eyes shining with unspoken emotion, and then, as if drawn by some irresistible force, they kissed. The moment their lips met, a terrible shriek split the air. The calm waters of the river exploded outward as Adana burst from its depths, her beautiful face contorted with rage. "Betrayer!" she howled, pointing a clawed finger at Emeka. "Oathbreaker! You swore yourself to me!" Olana screamed and tried to run, but vines of riverweed erupted from the ground, entangling her legs and dragging her towards the water's edge. "No!" Emeka cried, reaching for her. But he too found himself ensnared, helpless as Adana approached. "You were warned," Adana hissed, her voice no longer melodious but grating like grinding stones. "Now you will pay the price, you and all you hold dear." With a gesture, she sent Olena plunging into the river. Emeka struggled against his bonds, screaming Olena's name as the waters closed over her head. "Please," he begged Adana, "take me instead. Spare her, spare the village. This is my sin, not theirs." Adana's laugh was like breaking ice. "Oh, my faithless husband, taking you is only the beginning." With that, she dove back into the river, dragging Emeka with her. As the air left his lungs and water filled them instead, Emeka's last thought was of the terrible retribution that was about to be unleashed on his home. In the days that followed, terror gripped Umuaka. Fishermen vanished from their boats, leaving them to drift empty back to shore. Children playing near the water were snatched away, their frantic parents finding nothing but small footprints leading into the river. The water itself seemed to turn against the village, flooding homes and poisoning wells. Those who tried to flee found the river had somehow encircled the entire village, cutting off all escape routes. Umuaka had become an island of fear in a sea of malevolent water. As the horror stretched into weeks, the surviving villagers huddled in the chief's compound, the highest point in the area. They shared what little food remained and whispered fearfully about what had brought this curse upon them. Emeka's mother, her face lined with grief and guilt, finally spoke up. "It is my fault," she said, her voice quavering. "I pushed my son to marry when he said he could not. I thought I knew best, but I angered something beyond my understanding." The village chief, Olana's father, shook his head. "No, it is I who must bear the blame. I encouraged my daughter's affection for Emeka, hoping for an advantageous match. We have all been blind to the true forces at work here." As the arguments and recriminations flew, a small voice piped up. It was Eni, a young girl known for her vivid dreams and uncanny insights. "It's not your fault," she said, her eyes wide and unfocused. "It's the river bride. She's angry because her husband betrayed her." The adults fell silent, staring at the child. "What do you mean, Ne?" the chief asked gently. "What river bride?" Ne's gaze seemed to look through them, seeing something only she could perceive. Emeka married her, promised to be hers forever, but he kissed another and now she's punishing everyone. A ripple of shock went through the gathering. Suddenly, Emeka's sudden wealth, his reluctance to marry, his mysterious absences, it all made terrible sense. "How do you know this child?" Emeka's mother asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ne blinked, focusing on the old woman. "I see her in my dreams. She's so angry, so sad. She trusted him and he broke her heart." The chief stood, his face grim with resolve. "Then we know what we must do. We must appease this This river bride, beg her forgiveness, make offerings. It's our only hope. And so, as the water crept ever closer to their refuge, the people of Umuwaka prepared for a ceremony unlike any they had performed before. They gathered what meager offerings they could: fish, palm wine, cola nuts. The village dibia, or traditional priest, led them in chants and prayers to the river spirit. As the sun set, casting blood-red light across the churning waters, they made their way to the river's edge. The dibia waded in up to his waist, arms raised in supplication. "Great spirit of the river," he called out, his voice carrying across the water. "We come before you in humility and fear. We acknowledge our trespass, our ignorance of your claim. We beg your forgiveness and ask that you show mercy to our people." For a long moment there was only silence. Then, with a roar that shook the very ground, the river seemed to rear up, forming a massive wave that towered over the villagers. Women screamed, men fell to their knees, certain that their last moment had come. But instead of crashing down upon them, the wave held its shape, and there, at its crest, stood Adana in all her terrible glory. Her beauty was fearsome now, her eyes glowing with an unearthly light, her hair writhing like snakes around her head. "You dare," she said, her voice booming across the land, "to beg forgiveness now? After your people took what was mine, tempted my husband into betraying our sacred bond." The dibia prostrated himself in the shallows. "Great One, we did not know. We are but mortals, blind to the ways of spirits. If blood must be shed to appease you, take mine, but spare the innocent, I beg you." Adana's laugh was like thunder. "Your life? What use have I for one measly life when I can take you all?" "Please," a new voice called out. Emika's mother stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Great Spirit, if anyone is to blame, it is I. I pushed my son, unknowing of his commitment to you. Take me, punish me, but let the others live." For the first time, Adana's expression softened slightly. "You would trade your life for theirs, old woman." "I would," Emika's mother said firmly. "I have lived my life. Let the young ones have a chance to live theirs." Adana seemed to consider this for a long moment. Then her gaze fell on Ene, who stood at the front of the crowd, staring up at the river spirit without fear.